Welcome to the Please Suck Less podcast, a podcast where I voice my opinions and views about things that piss me off and how we can make the world suck just a little bit less. Thanks for listening. So I want to let you in on a little secret, although it's not really a secret, shouldn't be a secret. When you learn something, pass it on. Pass it on to not only your higher-ups, because they can benefit, but to your peers, other officers, if you're an officer or chief officer, as well as your subordinates, or the people that entrust you to lead them. So I want to tell you a couple of stories. The first one was when I was young. I got hired at the age of 18, so I would say somewhere within my first year of being on the job, we were dispatched for an automatic fire alarm in a building. It was an AT&T switching station, but it was a high-rise, probably about 10 stories or something like that. And we'd already been to this building 2 or 3 times already over the last couple of shifts. I had a faulty alarm. Nonetheless, the 911 call was dispatched for fire alarm. In where I worked, we would get an engine, single engine, and a ladder truck, both of which came out of my station that I was currently assigned. So I was riding third on the engine. It was a 3-man engine company, so I was riding in the back. We call it the small lines position or the attack line position. And it was the second time we had run this particular high-rise this shift. So this was probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I specifically remembered it was a Saturday because there was nobody in the building. Even though it's a switching station, there's still some offices and things like that there. So we respond, and my lieutenant, seasoned guy, been around for a long time, solid dude. We prided ourselves that we always strive to do the right thing. So we responded, spotted our water supply, full PPE, SCBA. Because it was a high-rise, we bring our high-rise pack. For those that may be unfamiliar with that, it's a pack that has 150 feet of, at the time, 1.75 inch with a fog nozzle that was a breakaway that had a smooth bore underneath, and then the officer bought an additional 50 feet in case we needed to add on to that, which would give us a total of 200 foot. So we arrived on the scene, and like I said, it was the second time we were there. So got off the engine company, full PPE. I had my SCBA on, all my equipment, and I turned to Mickey and I said, for some reason, I asked him, I said, hey, Lou, you want me to grab the pack? And he said, no, we've already been here. He said, let's just go on up and see what it is. The annunciator panel said it was on the 6th floor, so we took the steps. When we got up to the 6th floor, everything was clear. This was a center stairwell. It was a circular type stairwell, not a scissor stairwell or anything like that, nothing complicated. And so we get up to the 6th floor, and I look through the window of the door from the stairwell into the actual floor, and it was white, so it looked like I was looking at a wall, like through the window. I was actually looking at a wall directly across. And what it ended up being was when we cracked the door, lo and behold, we had smoke conditions, floor to ceiling. So I closed the door immediately. I looked at my lieutenant, Mickey, and I said, well, shit, looks like we got work. And he looked at me, straight-faced, then he kind of cocked a little grin, and he said, we got caught with our pants down. He said, but at least we have our SCBA, we have our PPE. Let's get masked up. Let's take a quick look down the hallway to see what we have, see if we can see what it is. He was going to go ahead and fill the box alarm assignment, which would have bought another 3 engine companies and another ladder truck. So as I opened the door, it didn't have that specific smell of a working fire. It was more of a Class A smell. Paper. So just inside the door to the right, there was a box that had some papers in it that was smoldering, and it almost burned itself out. And that's what it ultimately was. We didn't call for the box. We pulled the cardboard box out into the hallway and had the driver bring up a water can and just kind of took care of that. So we saved face without anybody knowing what happened, but Mickey and I knew what happened. And we came back downstairs when it was all done, and sat down on the back step, and basically Mickey, my lieutenant, basically had a hot wash. He said, Dave, he said, we got caught with our pants down this time. He said, so let this be a lesson to you as you move forward in your career. No matter how many times you run an alarm bells call, he said, always approach that building is on fire until we say it's not. And then and only then do we not bring all of our tools and equipment in. So the moral of the story is, no matter what you're running, you bring the right tools to perform the job as if that job was truly a job. And from that day forward, till the day I retired, and to this day now, when we run a call, whether it's an automatic home fire alarm or an alarm bells call or a nuisance call like a activated CO detector with no reported sick people, full PPE, we're bringing our SCBA. If it's for a CO, I'm bringing my meter. We're going to meter the building. If it's an automatic fire alarm, like in a commercial structure, again, full PPE, SCBA. I would even have some of my newer firefighters, if it was like a garden apartment or something like that, maybe pull a line to the front, an attack, like a cross lay. If it was a high-rise, was definitely taking the high-rise pack as well as the officer's pack, forcible entry tools, the whole 9 yards, every call that we ran. And I was never, ever to this day caught with my pants down without having the right equipment with me. And I say this because there are people out there that are afraid to admit when they're wrong or afraid to share information when they know they're wrong to their subordinates and to their peers to say, hey, I got caught with my pants down. Here's a lesson. I've learned from this. I want you to learn from this. So as you move forward in your career, you don't make the same mistakes. That's what learning in the fire service is all about. But we have people out there that would, right in front of your face, when you know that they were wrong, they know they were wrong, wouldn't acknowledge it or would play it off that it was somebody else's fault. Those are not leaders. Those are people that you can still get good information from, like, I'm not going to be like that person. Put your ego in check. Eat the humble pie, eat a little bit of crow, admit when you're wrong, and turn every negative into a learning environment. Turn it into a learning situation, and then pass that on, like I'm passing it on to you right now. So I tell you that story because I want to leapfrog into my next story. Actually, I'm going to tell 2 more stories. The next story was when I was a battalion chief. I was a fairly new battalion chief, like less than a year on the job as a battalion chief. I was fortunate that I had really good mentors that mentored me, one of which was my captain when I was just a master firefighter, which is like a technician. When he was my captain, he was a great mentor. He taught me a lot of things. He prepared me to be a lieutenant, and then ultimately prepared me. He ended up being my battalion chief when I was a captain. He prepared me to move on to that next level, made sure that the tools and knowledge that he had, he gave to me. He was a true leader. So I say that because I'm dispatched for a high-rise fire in downtown Silver Spring. And like I said, I had less than a year on the job, and the first due engine company, Station 1, or as I call One Engine, because they are that's what that company was when they built the firehouse, the new firehouse. It's Station 1, now it's One Engine. Another story for another time. They arrived on the scene. It was reported people trapped. It was like 10 o'clock in the mornings, and it was a cold morning. It was like March, so it was pretty cold outside still. They arrived on the scene. They had fire showing from the front of the building, top floor apartment, with the reported people trapped. They immediately, full PPE, SCBA, they had their high-rise pack. Obviously, they knew they had work. They made entry through the front, through the lobby. They took the elevator up to 2 floors below. They hooked up to the standpipe pack. When they got up to the fire floor, they immediately found somebody lying in the hallway. The first due truck company was already putting the stick up to the top floor. They packaged that person up pretty quick. They pulled that person into an empty apartment that was away from the fire, packaged that person up. They pulled that person down. Ultimately, that person succumbed to their injuries. That was actually the person's apartment was on fire. They were the occupants of that apartment. The second due ladder truck arrived on the scene to the rear, immediately went to work. They had people hanging from balconies. All in all, there were 10 rescues that were made, and all 10 of those people needed medical attention. There was elderly people. The building housed a lot of elderly people. And at the time, there was probably about 80 people in the apartment building. So 10 of them needed medical attention right away, including the gentleman whose apartment was on fire. He was burned up pretty bad. Took the medic unit away right away. The gentleman that was my battalion chief that mentored me and coached me to be a battalion chief was actually the second responding chief on that call. And I was so fortunate for him to get into the car. He could tell right away I was nervous. Handling the fire was easy because crews were going to work. But handling the fact that now I have a potential mass casualty incident, I only had one EMS unit on the scene. So I immediately had to declare an MCI. And this particular battalion chief was so calm. He looked at me and he said, Dave, he said, this is what we're going to do. He said, declare an MCI, maintain radio silence for everybody unless they have a critical message. He said, let's go ahead and start 5 more ambulances. Let's start 2 more medic units. And I know that a couple of these drivers that aren't engaged in fire operations are medics. So let's go ahead and set up a triage area. Where do we want to put these people? So we set the framework up. We went from a 2-alarm building fire with multiple rescues to a mass casualty incident, all in one incident. And because he was so calm and he was so precise with what we needed to do, that incident ran so smooth. The nervousness went away from me, a new battalion chief, even though I think at the time I probably had 25, 26 years on the job. It was a significant incident. That just doesn't happen all the time. So we had a medic that they brought all the injured people to the rear of one of the engine companies. They set it up. As the EMS units came in, we set up our triage, treatment, and transport. All the while, these guys are still fighting fire. Fortunately, it was a top floor. They got it knocked pretty quick, a little bit of extension. They had a shelter in place, a couple of people, had one of my engine companies actually had to stay with a mother and child out on the balcony. Took a little bit of smoke, so we actually used ropes to pull up first aid kits, oxygen, things like that. They were treating people. So, the battalion that I was assigned to, these were a bunch of heavy-hitting dudes anyway. They were just top-notch at their job. And this fire went flawless. And it was all because of my second battalion chief on the scene having that calm demeanor, recognized right away that this was something that was out of the ordinary. He helped me knock it out of the park. And so what I learned from him was no matter what's thrown at you, maintain your composure. And it's one of the things that I teach now when I teach incident command. I said, you can feel like a total basket case inside, but the moment you key up that microphone to give instructions, you have to be calm and you have to be collected with your thoughts and with the things that you're going to say, because that's going to set the tone. That's command presence. They equate it to, you see a duck on the water and they're so graceful when they're swimming, but if you look underwater, their feet are moving so fast. Well, that's what you feel like on the inside when you're faced with a situation that's kind of out of the norm. So my advice to you people that are listening, no matter what your rank is, no matter what's being thrown at you, we are 911. We are who people call. When you arrive on the scene, you take that deep breath, hold it for 5 seconds, let it out, get yourself under control. When you key that microphone, give clear, concise report and any instructions, and that's it. As long as you're calm, you're setting the tone of that incident. So those are some of the things that I learned. And then the last thing that I learned is what we call task saturation. Fast forward into my career, now I've had a couple of years under my belt as a battalion chief, dispatched in the middle of the day for a apartment fire. And I was literally right behind the first due engine company. We arrived on the scene right away. This was a non-sprinklered 5-story, we call them mid-rises, pre-World War II construction. So it was brick on the front, but it was wood on the inside. Right away, arrived on the scene, I knew as I'm approaching, I had fire already on 2 floors. Everybody had evacuated out, so we didn't have a rescue issue, although it doesn't negate us from doing search and rescue. I had 2 engine companies pulling 2 lines. My mistake is I should have paired up 2 engine companies to have them get 1 line in place. It was a well-advanced fire. But the reason why I want to tell this story is when the rescue squad arrived on the scene, it was a mutual aid rescue squad, and they had 6 people on their rescue squad. And we were having a hard time getting the attack line to the fire itself. It was slow going. So we were about 20 minutes into it, and I don't have water on the fire yet. So I had to end up calling what we call a tactical withdrawal. Pulled everybody out to the common hallway, and I had the crews that were on the delta side where the fire was. They had a charged 2.5-inch line. They knocked a majority of the fire back in order for our crews to be able to get in to finish the job, which is what happened. Before I could do that, as I made that tactical withdrawal, I had to do a personal accountability check. I needed to make sure that everybody was out of the fire area. They weren't going to get hit with a hand line. So I part checked everybody. I get to the rescue squad. I part check the rescue squad, and they tell me we split our crew, and I have 3 with me, but my other 2 are somewhere else in the building. So right away, I'm pissed because they split their crew, and that officer doesn't know where his people are. And I did not specifically let them split their crew. They should have been working together. So I had to call for those 2 people 3 or 4 times, which delayed that fire attack by a good 3 to 4 minutes. Finally, I got a hold of them. They were in a safe place. They were accounted for. I told them to get back with their crew, move to the common hallway. They got a majority of the fire knocked. We got lines in place. Ultimately, we got the fire knocked. And I was pissed that they had split their crew. And instead of me addressing it right then and there on the scene, I needed to make sure that I had all the information. So I immediately contacted our communications. I had to put together an after-action report, so I wanted a copy of the audio. I listened to the audio, and to my surprise, that rescue squad called and said they were responding with 6, and they specifically asked me to split the crew, and my answer was, it wasn't muffled, it was clear. I gave them permission to split their crew, but I was so task-saturated that I don't remember saying it. So ultimately, that's on me. And I tell you this story because I tell this story to everybody else. You need to control the distractions that are in your command post in order to take in all the information, getting that good situational awareness. I did not know that they had split their crew, even though I specifically gave them permission, and it wasn't accounted for in my tactical worksheet. So if something catastrophic would have happened, I had no idea where those guys were. So, to sum all this up, I know it's not my typical rant. It was just some information that I wanted to throw out there. This is probably the last Please Suck Less podcast of the year. We'll be starting back up again in January. But I wanted to throw that out there that, hey, we're not all perfect, and you need to make sure that you can admit that you're not perfect and that you learn from your mistakes. And even furthermore, you let everybody know the mistakes that you've made along the way that made you stronger, which in turn will make them strong leaders. If you don't, then you suck and you don't belong in our fire service. We need to learn from our mistakes. That way we can move forward for the next generation so they can be safe. They can learn from us. So again, like I always say, do better, suck less. I'm out. Have a good holiday.